If you've ever been to a motor show or a big car museum, you might have seen something like this thing behind me, a car or four-wheel drive that's stripped down to nothing. You might have even sat in one, but I bet you haven't driven one. Okay, next question. Can you guess what make and model this is? I mean, just taking the badges off some cars is enough to make them almost anonymous. But when you take all the panels off, it becomes a real head scratcher. Well, the fact is, this is a Volkswagen Amarok. True story. And the fact that it is stripped down means that you can get a much better idea of how a complex thing like a modern four-wheel drive works. And right away, you can see some of the clever things that Volkswagen's done with this vehicle. Things like the rear springs that sit alongside the chassis rail to give you a wider track and a bigger spring. It's all very clever. And in this case, it's like an election promise. It's dead easy to see through. Unlike the drivel that spews out of politicians, however, when you take the Miller shirt and moleskins off the Amarok, you get a very honest portrayal of what's happening when you hit the trails. So the other big question is, what's it like to drive? Well, it's bloody fast. It weighs a fraction of what a real Amarok weighs, mainly because it's made out of air. There aren't seat cushions, so it's pretty crude. There's no dashboard, so you don't really know what's going on. And you can smell everything, including the diesel exhaust. Let's go for a run. The downside is that with no door skins and plenty of holes in the floor, anybody riding in this thing tends to get plastered with whatever type of country they're covering. You've got to be very careful in water crossings to avoid accidental drowning, yours or the vehicle's. And if it's dusty, you'll be needing a beer or two to cut the dust at the end of the drive. And if I was crossing a cow paddock, I'd walk, I reckon. Now the other big question is why? Why do this? You might think it's all in the name of science. Actually, it's the work of Volkswagen's marketing department. The idea is to get people who are potential buyers for this type of thing to think beyond the brand. By serving this thing up as it is with no secrets, it's got nothing to hide. Politicians would hate it. But even if it is about marketing, us tappet heads can still get something out of it. Because in its jocks and socks, you can see the cleverness that VW has engineered into the Amarok. Things like the same rugged ladder chassis as used by everybody else in the class, but in the Amarok's case it's wide, allowing for the widest cabin and the biggest tub in its class. There's very solid under-front protection that allows you to ramp up and over objects. And even though the motor is relatively small at 2 litres, it's boosted by a high-tech bi-turbo sequential to pump out its 420 Newton metres, which is competitive in its class. Even the transverse case is clever. It uses a clutch pack to better distribute torque front to rear, taking the load off the traction control and helping to overcome the lack of low range in the automatic. But here's the other thing, just in case you were thinking this is some brilliant new idea by Volkswagen, think again. See, bush kids like me, 30 and 40 years ago, were dragging old cars off tips and out of backyards and paddocks, cutting the bodywork off and turning them into bush buggies. And you know what? They were always Volkswagens too.